Welcome to the Elephant Room, where we tackle the unspoken, uncomfortable, and unseen truth. Join Lynda Carmouche, your host, a licensed therapist, mental wellness strategist, and speaker, going beyond titles, addressing the emotional scars, hidden trauma, fears, and the silent battles many professionals face but rarely discuss. Come on in. The Elephant Room, where vulnerability meets strength. Hit subscribe and connect with hope, healing, and the courage to address the elephant in the room. Remember, the content here is for informational purposes only. Seek help from a qualified professional for mental health concerns, and discretion is advised for sensitive topics.
Hey, y'all, and welcome to the Elephant Room. I am Lynda Carmouche, your host, and I am super excited because we are about to have another raw and real conversation. Come on in the chat box, light it up, let me know that you are there, talk to us. You already know how we do it in the Elephant Room. The elephant's going to be running yet again tonight. The reality is, in our culture, oftentimes we do not talk about mental health. We say all kinds of things. We tell people things to do that really will never help them in the process of taking care of themselves mentally and making sure that they are well. Mental health doesn't just impact adults. It impacts children, adults, and our elderly loved ones. So tonight, we have Dr. Syretta James with us. And let me tell y'all, she has come with all the receipts. She's out here in these streets as a board certified, licensed psychologist. She's the real deal, y'all. She serves individuals throughout their lifespan. That means she worked with children. She worked with the teenagers. She handled issues with the grown folk. And then she go on over there and talk to grandma and grandpa. That's what that means. She currently manages the organizational operations at her nonprofit, which is based in Maryland. Dr. James earned her doctorate from Howard University, because I need y'all to know she is the real deal. You know, sometimes people are kind of getting some honoraries out there, no shade, but I need you to know that Dr. James, yeah, she has the receipts for her doctorate. She has specialized training in clinical trauma, early childhood mental health, and in child and family forensics. Y'all give some love to Dr. James as she comes into the Elephant Room. Hey, Dr. James.
Good evening. I am so happy to be with you and that bright light that you bring to every conversation.
Thank you for coming. Let me tell you, the listening audience here, they are live and well. They are lighting up the Elephant Room chat already, saying, what's up? How you doing? All kinds of hands. Good evening. So they want you to know that you are welcome.
I'm
Okay.
happy. I hear it.
So, Dr. James, one of the things that I really enjoy about conversations with you is that even though you're so intelligent, you can always break it down and be as raw and real as we need to be. When we talk about mental health being messy in families and what happens behind closed doors, what is something that comes to mind for you?
Well, one thing it is, I was raised in a family of very Southern Black folks. And so, folks didn't talk about what was wrong with them. And so when I grew up, I would know things that were wrong, or I would feel intuitively things were wrong, but I wouldn't know things had a name. It wasn't until, I got much older and entered my training that I was able to say, oh, well, that person has cognitive limitations, and that's perhaps why that person is behaving this way. In fact, one of my grandparents' sisters was institutionalized for a social emotional disorder, and nobody ever talked about it. We visited her in the nursing home, and that was not what we were told. So that's just how private it was, at least in my family. And when I looked around, it didn't take far, to look around in the community, many people that I went to school with, hung out with, that's not what they were talking about. I don't think I knew one person who was in counseling or therapy, at least out loud, when I was growing up. So think about transitioning into a field where I'm going to be dealing with the messy. Many people were like, "Oh, you going into that kind of profession? You're going to be mind reading.
Mm.
You're that mind reader." And that's kind of how it started for me to be like, well, psychologists don't read minds. That's not what we do.
No, not at
We
all.
work with.
Not at
That's
all.
not
We
the work
work
we
with
do.
people. We work with people. Even as a psychotherapist, we don't read minds.
Right.
So when I grew up also in the South in Louisiana. And I can remember members of our community doing things like walking down the street, having full blown conversations with themselves because nobody else was around. And people would say things like, be careful around him. And it created a fear about that person because you didn't know. But what happens when the person is in your family?
Right, right. When the person's in your family, it becomes your family's private shame, right? I had that aunt that was institutionalized, and my grandmother loved her dearly. Like we would visit her regularly. I was raised by my grandmother, and she was very much a part of our lives. However, the name, the thing, what she suffered from was never discussed. It was never discussed.
Mm.
And I think when you look back and you reflect, it really was a big private shame for our entire family that someone, and again, this was, in the 70s and the 80s, they don't institutionalize you anymore. We are now in the community, but, she was institutionalized. And what that must have felt like for her, being a proud Black woman who was active in her community. Southern communities are small. We're all well known. People
Yeah.
are coming together.
Yeah.
So there was a real private shame. And now, as I fast forward now to the mental health concerns that are actively going on in my family now, there is still a strong rejection of treatment. Even as a treatment provider, I'm often called in only for crisis case management. And I'm not a firefighter. I keep telling these people, like, that's not what I would do.
Get your suit and come put this fire out.
Right, right. But they love bringing me into crisis. And then they're very disappointed when, I'm not a crisis case manager. That's not what I do. I do long term treatment. And it's really unethical for me to be treating my family. I can triage and support you. And then I am ostracized and shunned. So early on, I
Ooh.
created lots of boundaries with family members. But even that's still hard because they're going to come to you. They're going
Yes.
to ask you the questions. And I do want to be a support. But what happens when you can't fix it? Because that's all anybody wants. They want, we are a microwave
Fix it
environment.
now.
Fix it now. Come do your work. Come do your magic.
Yeah.
And when you cannot do that, then my profession is often criticized. And then my profession then becomes translated into me. Well, Syretta can't help anybody. See, she's not really a doctor. She's not that kind of doctor. When I assure you, all those years of training, I'm a doctor.
I
So
am. You are. You are. You are. Let me tell you, you're getting all kinds of love in the chat box. I don't know if this is Maryland showing up tonight in the elephant room, but they are screaming some kind of love. Okay. So you said something. You talked about shame, and I don't want to go there yet because that's a whole nother conversation. But you said, surely my aunt was hurting. And a lot of the times, I don't think people understand that the individual who most often did not choose for this to happen to them. We're not talking about anything like drug induced psychosis. We're talking about just mental illness. It wasn't a choice for that person. Just
absolutely
like
not.
cancer isn't a choice, just like diabetes isn't a choice. Yet, we never stop oftentimes and say, that person is hurting, that person
Absolutely.
is struggling. Let's talk about it.
Because, one thing about mental health is that it's something that people can't see. So they think it's something that's in your control. But, we know that mental health is a biopsychosocial condition. So That means we have biological markers that are impacting how we're functioning. We also are impacted by the environment. So what happens in the environment impacts our functioning. And
Yeah.
so what we try to do as families, I think, is we try to scare everything straight, right? Like, so you said you grew up and don't be afraid of that man. And I think that's what happens initially, even for the person who's introduced to this mental health condition, is you're afraid of it. It
Yeah.
becomes this very quiet, dark conversation. Let's do anxiety for a second.
Yes.
Many of our youngsters are suffering from anxiety, whether by nature or by nurture. And that is, they know it before they're even showing it. Now, what is
Mm.
the first thing that you think black mamas and daddies say, especially to this generation?
Ain't nothing wrong with him.
And they don't have no right, no right. You don't have no right to worry, because of all the things that you have.
Oh,
And
okay, you're gonna go there. You're gonna go there. Things don't equal
safe,
love.
it's or safety.
Things don't equal safety. Things don't equal nurturing. And you
Correct.
said by nature or by nurture. Break it down for my listeners, Dr. James. What does it mean when a child comes in and you're saying by nature or nurture?
Because what we're dealing with is someone who does not, especially, we're going to address anxiety and the worry and the internalized conditions.
Can you
They
tell
don't.
us what anxiety is?
So anxiety is just massive worry, right? It's they are so afraid of the world. Things around them are fear inducing. And some things we know, some things we need to be afraid of. Like, I need you to know when a bear is coming through. Like, don't
Yes.
go pet the bear. So it's an adaptive system that we are all born with, and it allows you to understand and recognize dangers in the environment. So
Yeah.
we all have it. When it becomes overactive is when it becomes a problem. When everything is dangerous, when everything is fear inducing. And so when you have that kind of reaction, children naturally have that, again, we're born with it. But things can also, like humiliation, can be something that's very, very psychologically unsafe.
Can
So
you give me an example of what humiliation might sound like?
So, like standing up in the middle of a classroom, teachers and all these educators who say, we're going to stand up and we're going to present our cases and we're going to speak loud and be judged by our friends and the teacher. That
And,
can be,
and the teacher and the parent who says, "You're telling me that so and so made a better grade than you." What is it doing to that child?
right. It's this integration of an experience of, I'm going to be judged. I might not be perfect. All these youngsters, they want to be perfect. Honey, break up with that, because we're human. We just don't have perfect in us. But we have these framings for ourselves that we're going to be perfect. This is self-story we're talking to ourselves about. And then we're asked to present in class. Think about the psychological shutdown that happens. Your body reacts instantaneously. It does not need much help. It does not need much help, because I assure you this, the body is programmed to keep you alive. Like,
Yes.
that's its core job. Your body, your brain wants to save you. And so it will do all it can, to include creating intense feelings of worry so that you are freezing publicly. And then what happens the moment there's a small chuckle or the teacher is critical? That level of humiliation can have the same level of threat as if someone were getting ready to harm you. And so
Ooh,
that's
this
what
is
these
good.
youngsters are dealing with. They are
This is
dealing with
good.
that kind of threat. And we don't get that as an observer, as a parent. We don't get that. So
Mm-mm.
what does most parents do? I'm going to get out there and smack you if you don't do it. Or I'm going to take away your phone if you don't do it. Or you can't see your boyfriend. All these terrible things, instead of creating an environment that's supportive,
And sa-
nurturing, and safe.
and safe. And let's take this scenario of this kid who was in the classroom and now they have this fear of standing before people. Does that automatically leave them, Doc, because they got older?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So we generalize these experiences over time because most people have never even said that out loud, right? I had a very humiliating experience happen to me in high school where I was pulling on a blanket and I fell down the entire flight of stairs on the bleachers. And I didn't really hurt myself physically. Praise God. Like, the creator was there. And I think there was this beautiful tumble that happened. But what did happen is no one helped me. No one helped me. So not only was I humiliated, I learned to not trust in anyone.
Stop. You got to stop. You got to stop right there, because this is pivotal. You had a tumble and you did not hurt yourself, but because nobody came to see about you, what did it create?
So all my life, I am a me fi meer. I got this. I can take care of me. I don't need nobody. That's who I am. That's how I adapt and handle problems. From that very situation. Now, did I recognize that in that high school moment? I did not.
No.
But I can tell you adaptively, that's who I am. And I fight very hard, even in my marriage, to invite in my husband. We've been married for a very long time.
What's long? What's long?
Like, okay, so I'm very, very bad at the actual time we've been together. Like,
I hope your husband is listening.
I know. No, I don't know the dates. I'm not sentimental, but it's over 25 years we've been together.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
That's good. So I do know that, but I don't know that we got married in 2022. No, not in 2020, 2002. And in 2022, it would have been our 20th year. And we did celebrate a wonderful anniversary.
Okay.
So
you did good.
I did good with that, but he planned it all. He planned it all. It was great. He's such a wonderful partner. But I will tell you, when we were dating in our 20s and actually married in our 20s, I married him in my 20s. One of our biggest problems was, and he would say it this way: there's too many men in this relationship.
Dr. James, I don't know where my fan is that I usually have, because I need to fan myself right now. You have got to say this, because so many sisters need to hear. A lot of times our men don't step up because we have brought our baggage into the relationship and we are acting like the man.
Oh my goodness. I had a big old backpack of stuff. I was raised by a very matriarchal Black grandmother. She would put Medea to real shame. She was no joke. Her name was Rosalina Carter. I think the world was afraid of her. She was a pistol toter. I mean, she was the truth. And I came into my relationship thinking that was how we were supposed to interact. Now, lovingly, not so lovingly all the time, my spouse helped me see through that need to just be by myself, that he could also carry some of our load, some of our burden. But I can now, through reflection and experience and on my own time with therapists and clinicians working through my own marriage, recognize that came from those moments when in childhood when nobody helped me. And that stood out to me, because I can still feel the fear of tumbling down a flight of stairs. Like, it was a flight of stairs. And thankfully the angels were there and I did not get physically harmed.
Yes.
But I got so emotionally harmed from that situation that I have carried it over and generalized it. And our youngsters do that now. So when you have these anxious babies, it could be one pivotal moment that you've missed. You weren't there for mom and dad. So you saying you ain't got nothing to be worried about is not true. There are times we are not there to see what is the harm.
Okay, I got to press pause because I got to say this. Otherwise, I'm going to jump up out of my seat, Doc. This is why when a child says to a parent, I feel this, I feel that, you cannot have a counter response as, so you're telling me you don't want this cell phone? You're telling me the money I spend on ballet or for basketball camp, you're telling me all those clothes I buy. You're comparing apples to oranges.
Absolutely.
One has
Absolutely.
nothing to do with the other. But then I want the listeners to make sure you don't miss this. Dr. James said it happened as a girl. It showed up as a woman, as an educated woman, as a married woman, as a mama, and she's had to work through it with a number of tools.
Absolutely.
But she also had to allow her husband, who loved her, to show her, baby girl, there are some things that need to be changed. And sometimes, Doc, I don't think we're open to
No.
hear what the other person is saying, and that causes us to get stuck. People
Absolutely.
think mental health is just about hearing voices or being chronically depressed. Mental health shows up in the person who's putting on the suit and the red bottoms and go to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very, and that's why I said, you said, what is it? Why is it so messy for families? It's because you can't see it. You can't define it. So when you have a broken leg, you can say, my leg is broken. And that's the problem. But you can't necessarily say, I don't trust people because someone hurt me.
Mm.
Right? You can't say that to people. And I think a lot of Black people, especially educated Black people, have financially decided that that's going to be the financial pacifier.
Yeah.
And so I can't tell you how many people I talk, like, your money does not matter, right? Like, it does
Yeah.
not matter.
Yes.
Bob Marley said this wonderful quote, and I embrace it every day of my life, which was, sometimes you're so poor, all you have is money. And I can tell you, there are lots of Black people walking around here in a poverty condition,
Ooh.
yet they have money.
One of the listeners says, you see this and hear this so much in the church. Now, I wasn't going to go there, Doc, but since the listener has called it out, I feel the need to go ahead and step into that section of the elephant room. Okay? We can say, a lot of the times I think we take religion or spirituality and we use it in ways that it was never meant to be used.
Correct. Correct.
No shade, because
No.
I love the Lord with all my heart and he is who guides me. But at the end of the day, a lot of us can't even surrender
Mm,
because of fear. And I always ask the question, who dropped you?
mm,
Who left you?
yeah.
Who hurt you?
Right.
We want to take mental illness and put a picture on it. But what we really need to do is take the picture off and leave it faceless, because a lot of us are walking around and we are not mentally well.
Correct. And you know, one of the this is how I explain the kind of dichotomy that can exist with the church and with clinicians. So, you know, I believe that believers who are truly rooted in the messages of Christ and whatever you follow, you have these principles and ideals that are guiding and governing to help manage your life and your environment and the decisions you make. But remember, I said before, these are biological conditions many of the time.
Yes.
So, what we need to do is allow the spiritual part of us to be nourished in church and churches and mosque and wherever you get your spiritual food. But there is a need to invite in real clinicians and trained professionals to deal with that part that the church just cannot handle. And a real, like, that's just to say pastoral counseling cannot be a blessing to people,
Mm,
right? I think you can be absolutely blessed and found whole in those things. But a real clergy member should recognize what's beyond
yeah,
their level of training. And
yeah,
we should be able to have a partnership. And I
yes,
think that there are many, many um, religious organizations that do that and churches that do that. But there are also many that go well outside their bound. And
yes,
what one of the driving forces of that is because when you can control your flock, You can control how they feel, you can control how they act, and you can control how they respond. And so a lot of that is about control, not
Did you
about healing.
say control?
I did. I did. And it's important to control, right? Because that is what's feeding that community. Churches depend, like my nonprofit depends on the charity of others to kind of make it better. So does the church depend on the charity and commitment of others. And so when you can control how they're committed to you, then you really control your outcomes. And so I get it. When I run a nonprofit, I am very much dependent on the charity of others. Um, but that's not necessarily what's good for everybody in that community.
Especially when the control is unhealthy. And one of the listeners says it can cause you to lead hurting people and you're hurting yourself. And when you're
Absolutely.
hurting, pain creates a certain perspective.
Mm, it does.
Do you agree with me?
Absolutely. Pain can do many, many things. One, you can grow in pain, right? So that's
Ye-
a good positive thing. But
Yes.
many people shrink in pain. They stop. Once you get to your pain points, you don't grow. You don't push beyond that. And that's often what happens when we're introduced to our psychological pain. So many of us want to be repressing it, to be removed from it. But we know when you're digging into therapy, oh my God, you get naked. You are leaning into it. You are sitting on it.
And it don't feel
Public
good.
and it does not feel good. It's perhaps, do you think I'm a psychologist. Do you think it was easy for me to hear that I had masculine energy that was actually unattractive for my spouse? Like
Of
who
course
wants to
not.
do that? Right. Like that was not easy. And I have to say, when I first met him, I had this line where he said, "You're not perfect." He would always say, "You're not perfect, Syretta." I said, "Well, I'm damn near perfect." That's my line. I'm damn near perfect. Like, I don't know what I get that, but I'm almost that perfect.
Dr. James, you all the way in the elephant room now. Because you putting it out there. Look, don't come for me, hubby, because I'm almost there. And you know what? I think some of what we experience, especially when we come from a place that is very different than the place we're trying to go to,
Right.
we're really trying to figure it out. And we
Yeah.
stuff and we put it in
Hmm.
the back. And a lot of the times our teaching has told us things like, well, just pray about it.
Just pray about it. Just pray about it. Which is in some way, don't necessarily face it. Give it to someone else, because that's what you're doing with prayer, right? And I've had to have that conversation meaningfully with many of my faith led clients, which is you can pray about it. I want you to. I pray for you as well. But then that means you are giving the responsibility for the change, if you are not putting action behind that
Yes,
prayer, to
yes.
someone else that you are still seeking to find. Because every day you questioning, you ain't, some of these people ain't talking, they ain't heard from God, so you're giving it to someone else, when truly, and we know this, there's a true saying, only you can save yourself. I had to be the one who changed in my marriage, right? It
What
wasn't like my husband he had to change in some areas too, but I had to change, or we would not have been where we are now. 20 years
over
wouldn't have
over
been.
25 years, let me go ahead and
Right.
pinpoint that. But even the word of God says prayer without works is dead. That means pray. Come to me, pray, and give me what you can't handle. But then when you get through praying, get yourself up and go and get the help and work through the things you need to work through so that you
Absolutely.
can be
And do
better. Yes, you got to do the
do
work.
work.
You got to do the
Do the
work.
work. And we are really creatures of reinforcement and habit, right? Humans follow, like I am there. The older I get, I can see Rose Lena. Now, I said she was very much Medea like, and I don't even like that caricature, but I can see there's times when I got that same energy that she used to bring to situations. Now, it certainly came out different because I got all these degrees and I know how to talk and I know how to, but and she wasn't that way. She was very much self-taught and raw. But that doesn't mean I can't go there, right? That doesn't mean that I don't
Doc,
have a model.
Doc.
So I bring that up because in families, they expect you not to go there once you have a title. Once I became Dr. James, I wasn't supposed to also be sad, cuss, hate you, and all those other things. I was supposed to become some other person. That's not true. I actually cuss probably better than most people. My grandmother was a cusser. It makes me feel really, really good, folks. After a good day of a hard day, I'm cussing at you, which
Where
we
is
do.
my fan? Where is my fan? Dr. James, don't you release that cussing spirit in the elephant. It is so true. I think people forget that we are people before we are professionals. And that
Absolutely.
means we deal with everything that everybody else deal with. We may have some different tools in our toolbox, but if you catch us on the wrong day,
Correct.
at the wrong
Correct.
time, in the wrong situation, you might get somebody other than Dr. J. Let me say that.
Right.
There
Right.
is a
Syretta
list.
might come back.
Put Syretta up tonight. We don't want Syretta up. We won't put her up. There is a listener who has had asked a question, which I think is a really good question for you. The listener says, can you treat the patient without treating the entire family? Or is the treatment family or individual focused? Oh, this is good because so many times parents come and say, here, fix
Fix it.
them.
Yep. So I will tell you, my orientation is very much a family centered. So my training is such that I was actually trained as a school psychologist, and then I got re-specialized into forensics, family and forensics. But I always started my praxis out working with when you're a kid person, because I'm really truly a kid person. Like I work with kids as young as 3. I identify and follow them. Sometimes, I mean, I break up with them after a certain point, but they don't ever want to break up with me. But when you're working with children, you have to work with the families. Because I can tell you this, many of my children are healthier than their parents. By the time they have done that individual work with me, they're healthier. And this is why I love kids. Like, truly, I'm not an adult clinician at heart. So if I'm working with you, generally I'm coming because I'm framing my work around your family. There's some kind of family fracture or kid fracture. That's how you've been brought to me. And I love it when kids say, like for my anxious kids, my mom is anxious. They can pick it out now because I've trained them to see, what are your triggers, what anxiety looks like, how is it showing up in the body, what things are happening in the space. So they'll go home and say, I didn't know this, but my mother, and I'm talking about these are 8, 9-year-old kids, is so anxious, worries about everything. And I tell her to turn down that anxious meter. And what are your triggers, mama? And parents aren't used to that level of exchange, and that tension sometimes really creates. I've had families remove kids because
Yeah.
I am telling them, I am teaching them too much. So to answer the listener's question, yes, absolutely. I start with the child initially, depending on the age, but I am always providing supports to the families. I'm that clinician that's providing updates and saying, hey, we're working on recognizing our triggers. You at home reinforce when they're starting to use feeling words. Because so many kids, there's not like, you don't come into the world understanding feelings. That's just not how it works.
No.
You're taught feelings, and you're taught feeling words, and you're taught triggers, and you're taught how to explore those things. And I don't know when you're taught, because I'm a clinician, I do it a lot. But it's not something maybe many people are actually taught. I can't remember sitting down and saying, oh, this is what sad feels like. This is what happy feels like. This is what jealous feels like. I didn't do that. I had to grow into that experientially, but I didn't necessarily get that training, which is why therapy is so great for kids. If you introduce that cycle, that social skills early, then they become really good adults who can say, no, affirm and validate my feelings when someone's saying, like moms and dads, you shouldn't feel that way. No, they can feel that way, and you can honor their feeling, and you can say, then you need to do something about it. I can't. So
That's good.
I'll give a really, really great example of this. A parent was mad because the daughter was not adjusting well to the new partner. Okay, a child of divorce, not adjusting well to the new partner. The new partner was doing all the right things and was absolutely loving. But one of the
Pause,
things the
Doc.
child said,
Pause, Doc. I'm going to give it to him in another way, real quick. Mama was mad because the baby wasn't liking her new boo. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I got you, Doc.
you got me, you got me. So the word that came up, the feeling that came up for the child was betrayal. I'm betraying my dad, right? Huge feeling. And this is a child smack dab in adolescence, really trying to figure out what they are and who they are. And now they have to balance this dynamic of betrayal,
Mm.
right? So strong feeling. Mom shut it down at every avenue, made sure that the child was starting to call that person dad. They were getting, it was all these, pressures that was given to this child, where all the child needed to do was deal with betrayal. Now, that's not something that you deal with in a second, because it's a blended emotion. It's a sadness, right? It's a blend. It's an emotional blend. And remember, our feelings are adaptive, right? It's helping us navigate this very, very threatening world. She wasn't sure if she could trust that person yet. So they hadn't built their enough relational bonds for themselves. She didn't know how they were going to work together with her father, who she did clearly deeply loved. She didn't know if mom was changing, and mom was changing. And that was a big dynamic. Like, my mom is not the same person. And I said, well, she can't be the same person. There's a new person in her life. So she's not going to be how she showed up with dad, because this other person's not dad. So it was all of this tension that was
Pause.
brewing.
Pause, Doc. Pause. I got to bring the listeners up to speed. So when you go get your new boo, and the child is not liking him or her immediately, don't rush the baby and say, well, it's been 3 months already. Well, you were with him 3 months. The kid just met him last weekend, and now you want to go to Disney and have a family weekend getaway, and you angry because the kid threw a temper tantrum every day. That child, what the doctor just said is, that child has a lot of big emotions they're trying to work through, understand, and they're trying to figure out, what is this and where am I going to be in the mix of all of the stuff that's going on.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
so it takes time and it takes validation. The one thing that mother struggled with was validating. Like, that makes sense. That could be a thing that's happening, right? You feel that. And so when a child is not validated, again, that's the same thing. What do? They adapt in a very primitive way, right? Which is to save their lives. They either shut down, they act out, they fight, right? They get mouthy, as parents say. Then they start to avoid. They do all of these things to keep themselves safe psychologically, which is what a kid is gonna do, and maybe even an adult who's not that actualized. So, adults do this too now. Okay, we're acting like this is just relegated to children.
No,
Adults
it's us too.
Right. So the work there that has to be done with this family is really allowing this child to, one, navigate what betrayal is, which is probably a new feeling. I don't know that they've ever had that feeling before. Like, what did they betray before? And then how do you kind of overcome it? And how does a person then establish an adult relationship? Everything happens on a developmental course. And we have to be very aware of that as just working in the world. That if we don't fix certain things at periods of our development too, your 16-year-old self's going to keep showing up, maybe till you're 60, 70. It just keeps showing up.
Say that again.
Because
I need you to say it again.
We need to make sure that if we don't fix things at that early in that developmental course, we get stuck there. And so we need to make sure that we're actually going through the developmental course that has to take place. And a lot of times we don't allow ourselves. I see that even in my own family, where, again, mental health is at the forefront of this discussion. And this is something that happened early on in that development that no one talks about. It's like our family secret. And it keeps showing up. And we
Yes.
all getting old. We're all getting old. I'm a grandma now. Like, I don't have time to be dealing with
Holding
all
on to
these
the
things.
secrets.
Correct. And I don't want to. And I also don't want to be bought in only when there's a problem. Oh, I'm at the hospital right now. I had a family member actually do that to me. I'm at the hospital right now. I need a letter.
No.
What do you need a letter for? And I'm not your treatment provider.
And you know what? A lot of the times we see the signs, we see the symptoms, we know what has happened. When there's domestic violence in the family and you grow up in it, you don't just show up one day and you're okay because you're now 18 years old. When you are the
Absolutely.
child, the adult child of an alcoholic, all of the
Absolutely.
things you live through, those are your lived experiences. They made an imprint on your mind, on your body, on your emotions. They don't just go away. Sometimes, Doc, I think we're wondering why we're struggling in certain areas in adulthood. We're getting angry, we're agitated. Nobody can tell us anything. We have to control the situation. Whatever it is, we're isolating. I think we think it's who I am.
Right. Right.
A
Right.
lot of this
But
stuff is
it's so
unhealed stuff that has impacted our mental health.
absolutely. And sometimes we don't understand that when someone says mental health, it does not mean you're crazy. Like, I just want us to break up with that. Like, even if you have a bout of depression, which I know all of you have because we're humans,
Say it
does
again.
not mean it does not mean it's this fixed state that we cannot move past it. It is an experience that you've had. And it's the what we call you depressed to describe the classification of symptoms that you're presenting with.
Oh,
That's it. And when those symptoms resolve, then you are no longer depressed. Then you move on and you can kind of
yeah.
celebrate the fact that it was a temporary state. So not everything that's mental health is this permanent badge of shame. Now we do have more chronic illness. And like diabetes, like any kind of other chronic illness, it needs to be treated in a long-term way. And the thing about families is having a chronic illness does not make you a functional adult, does not make you a functional part of the family, does not make you a problem to the family. You can actually have children if you have somebody in your family that has a mental health condition, people,
Yeah.
right? Many people are doing it.
Yes.
But the best thing that could happen in a family is if you actually supported them through treatment. My own family, and I'm a clinician and I am someone who celebrates it, and I am also a victim of it. When my daughter was going through her own periods of anxiety, I did not want medication. And when I sat back and really understood what the problem was, it was my own personal shame because, psychologist me had a child who also struggled with
Oh,
a mental health concern, and I couldn't fix it. So remember, I've been a mom a long time. I'm a grandma now. So that was early momming, right? I'm over it now. Call your therapist, get your medicine, get your friend, tell your friends about like that's what helps you out. But
yeah.
early on, I was not that vulnerable, and
Good.
I delayed so many things because of my own personal shame. So that's the thing about families is you're dealing with your own stuff. This is helping the person who's experienced it. Sometimes your kids are yelling, shouting, "I need help," and you are the barrier because you know
Ooh.
how many parents are shopping diagnoses. Oh, it can't be this one. It can't. It's like I'm like spinning books sometimes with these people so that they can accept what it really. This is what I see. I'm
Ooh.
gonna go to 17 clinicians until I get the
The
diagnosis
one
that
I
I want.
feels good to me. One of the listeners said we need to pull the shame plug. We need to pull it because it is hurting us. And many of the parents that won't get help for the children, they themselves need help. And while your organization has done a really good job of making it a family experience, there are so many parents that want organizations and clinicians to fix the child. They are the problem,
Right.
but they won't get help on the journey of the child getting help.
Absolutely. Well, and I think true child people understand that. So the problem, part of that problem, as I see it, as a practitioner looking around in a 50,000-foot view, especially I train a lot of clinicians. And so if you get trained by me, you're getting trained in this ecological framework. But it's because many people who are actually serving are serving outside of their competency. So you have all these adult practitioners doing adult services with kids.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to work with kids, then you are absolutely going to be providing interventions to the family. That is a thing. And if you didn't hear it in your training program and you're like, oh, she lying, then I will tell you, then your training is defunct. Because if you are working with children, they don't live outside of a context of a family. They don't get to control their environment like adults do. So you have to then provide support to the environment that they cannot control as the clinician. Now, why do people not want to do that? Because that is a lot of extra work and we don't get paid to really support the families.
True.
So many
I'm a
people
witness.
right.
Witness.
So they shine away from providing that service because we can't bill it. We can't bill it.
I'm a witness.
And so they don't want it. So it's extra work.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you, if that's not what you're getting, then you need to find a truly trained child person because they know. They know. Every kid person I know, number one, we paint with our feet. We get on the ground. We don't wear good, beautiful clothes. When you're working with kids, that's not what you do. I mean, I look good, but you're getting down in the grit and the grind with them.
Because that's
right?
what they do. That's what they do.
That's what they do.
I also want to speak. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but I want to go back there. We talked about the children needing help and we talked about the parents needing support. Sometimes the situations that the parents are in their own lives is creating a home life that does not feel good for the children or other adults that live with them. Sometimes the mental health challenges that we're experiencing in our families, the root cause is sleeping down the hall or in the bed next to me.
Is the environment.
It's the environment. And you talk about the environment of our homes. I think we're medicating a lot of things, Doc, that can really be fixed if we made changes inside the environment that is supposed to nurture us.
Absolutely.
So I want you to talk about the importance of the home environment. And I want to say this. It's interesting that when we were talking in the pre-show, you said to me, and you smiled when you said it. You said, I am nurtured in my home and in my family. This is where I thrive and this is where I grow, and my husband and my children, you said they ride for me. That's a lot of people don't have that. So I really want us to spend a few minutes talking about how that home environment, and not always when it's abusive. I'm even talking about when you have parents in one room and the child is babysitting themselves, even when they're teenagers, in another room with their iPad, and there's no conversation and there is no opportunity for us to engage. Or when mom and dad are battling it out, they're not abusive toward each other because they're getting along, but it's not a nurturing environment. Can you talk a little bit about that?
This is such a complex topic, and it's something that I addressed in our ebook shame workbook. About a part of overcoming shame is really addressing your environment, right? And giving yourself permission to have safety. And I think that's where we start as families. So, again, I've been with my husband since I was a kid, really. I met him when I was 18. But one of the ways we framed our family was with safety. We were going to maintain psychological safety. We had real vision for how we wanted to work and operate as parents and how we wanted to support one another and our children. And I think we didn't do it perfectly, but I think if you ask our kids, we provided what we said we were going to provide.
That's good.
And I think that starts with a real decision about keeping your home safe and keeping your home nurturing. The problem is not many people themselves, especially, and this is not an indictment of the success of our Black generation now. I am so proud to be a part of this generation who's been successful and have been very thrice removed from integration, from segregation, and benefited from all the labor from the 60s and the 70s and the 50s that our parents did to equalize opportunities for us. But in the same vein, that created an environment where we were working and building this relationship with capitalism and wealth vision, wealth and work. Really, I think there's a lot of hard workers in this group that we didn't necessarily think about what it takes to support an interpersonal relationship.
The cost.
And so the cost. And so there has been a real cost. Like I think we are largely much more successful having new opportunities. And again, this is in a certain swath of people, because we know that there are still very many people who need that nurturing and that community and that development, and are really deeply impacted by poverty and systemic racism. So I'm not excluding that group. I'm just saying that there has been this growth model that has happened. And so families are really placing an emphasis on and a value outside of the interpersonal skills that it takes to develop a family, like listening, like eating together, right? It's not just good enough to feed your kids. You know how much information you get at the dinner table? Do you know how much information you get if you have a wake up and a nighttime routine? Do you know how much connection you get when you watch a movie with your kid, right?
Yeah.
That little bit of reinforcement, or just our thing was donuts at drop off. My kids, it's like they could depend on that Friday donut. Like those types of routines and rituals really show your family, one, how to love. The other thing is how to be flexible. See, we are very rigid, right? Because we were taught, don't mess up, don't do this, don't do that. But you know what? You can mess up and you can actually learn from a mistake. And I can still love you through a mistake. And it's that level of flexibility that we are training in these families through these interpersonal connections that they have to make, that many just don't have the capacity to do, because they're really, what I find with the families I'm seeing, they are working. They're taking care of things. They don't have time to come back and say, I need you to read a book. I need you to reinforce. I need you to do this. I need you to have this conversation. I need you to validate.
Yeah.
The very thing they say that is interrupting that is time.
Yes. Yes. But we're working so that we can buy them a $1,200 iPhone.
Right.
We're
Which is then
working.
going to give them different comforts.
We're working so that we can get them the latest tennis shoes or the longest wig, or,
Absolutely.
and we're losing them. And
Yes,
then they
we are.
grow up and we're angry because they don't know how to be
They want a
healthy.
hug.
And they're doing things that we don't want them to do. People don't start using drugs because they just want to use drugs. Most times they say, I'm numbing the pain.
I am numbing something. I'm pacifying. I'm doing
Yes.
something to remove myself from an experience.
Yes.
I can't
Oh,
tell you that, kangaroo care happens in the NICU when babies are born, and they with some kind of neonatal problem, and they always talk about the power of touch. I share that with a lot of my families, just that comfort. Sometimes, first of all, shut your mouths, listen more than you talk. When you're dealing with these anxious babies and these depressed children, you need to listen to them. And we have a problem of being superheroes and sheroes when we are around our children. And kids can handle things. Okay, they're very resilient.
they are.
So don't assume that they can't take care of themselves. They can. They can. They're the only ones who can really save themselves from these anxious moments and these depressive moments and these defiant moments. It's them, it's their choices. So, but just sometimes coming and touching them and letting them know that you're sitting with and being with is so valuable. I can't tell you how many parents struggle with that. And the thing is time. I don't have time. I don't have time. I gotta look.
Without
I
your
get it.
phone? Are you asking me to sit with my kid and touch
Right.
them without my phone, without being on social media, without checking my email? Are you asking me to do that?
Right. Right. And it's hard for them. It's hard for them.
Yes.
They just cannot connect in that way. And but the environment is cannot be understated. And you really need to work to create it. And it, the environment that I created for my family might not work for your family. You
Yes.
all have different sets of values, but create some plan and some value map that you figure out and you adapt and you integrate into the systems that
Yes.
work for you and your family.
Where they feel safe, where they feel
Validate.
loved, where they feel validated, where they feel seen. Now, let's take these same things and move them over to the adults that we love in our life. We want to feel nurtured. We want to feel
Absolutely.
loved. We
Heard,
want you to spend
seen.
time, heard, touched, all the
You're right.
things.
Right. All the
All the
things.
things.
When I hear an adult say they want to be validated, this just happened. Where I was having a conversation with a girlfriend who, it was a really actually interesting experience. It was a dark skin, light skin conversation, and I did not recognize the pain that my friend was going through because I didn't have that lived experience,
Yes.
and um, my initial reaction was to shut it down because I thought I was being diminished in some way because
Mm.
she was trying to give this reflection that I had it easier, right? At least that's how I heard it in the moment, reflectively, react with a reaction. But I calmed myself in that moment and just listened. And what I realized was we actually don't have the same lived experience. We're not, it may be similar, but it was not the same. And the moment of validation that came when she heard me say, wow, some of this I had not thought about because I'm just like, I'm black as you, right? That's what I felt. And I did not want to be diminished. That was the story that was looping in my head. But, I really did in that moment calm myself down to listen to that lived experience. And I benefited from it. And I heard how, we're not actually having the same
Yeah.
experience. There are
That's
some
so
things
good.
happening
That's so
that
good.
didn't happen
Sometimes
to
we
me.
don't listen. Sometimes we don't
We're not,
listen, and we're missing out on what loved ones are trying to say about their experience. We can be in the same room at the same time, have a similar experience, and I walk away with a totally different experience than you. And a lot of the times we're diminishing what that person is sharing because we're like, that's not what happened. Well, actually, it is what happened. And
right,
so
from
we
their
have to
perspective.
take some time to listen. I cannot believe it is the time is I don't know where the time went, Doc. I don't know. I think the elephants ate the time. I don't know what happened to the time. But there are so many good things in the chat box. Um, I have to mention this one. One of the listeners said, we gained so much as a people, but we lost so much. And that is so
Mhm.
true. I want you to speak to the people for a moment. That person who feels like, well, mental health is not them, it's not something that they've experienced, they don't understand it, they think that people should just be able to get over it and move forward. What is an encouraging word you can give to help people understand what we need to do in a community where mental health is running rampant?
I appreciate that moment to reflect because what comes to mind when anybody asks me, how do I bring Black people to mental health? Because that's how I heard that question. And the first thing I say is, you have a friend in me. And I know many clinicians are itching their ear. Oh, she said friend. And I get it. I have great boundaries. I know that we're not necessarily friends. But one thing we do have is we have a strong relationship. And that's one thing that is built when you are talking to a mental health professional, but particularly a Black woman who is walking along on these journeys with many people. And so if you can get past the name, the title, Dr. James, I'm always Syretta in every room. I don't break up with myself. That's one thing that I have trained myself to do is show up authentically in these spaces. And so you do have a friend in me, in all the people who endeavor to do this work. If you could just sit with this for a moment and commit to growing, because that's what you are doing when you are in a mental health moment, is that you need to grow beyond something. There's a lesson to be learned. There's an experience to be changed. There's something to be cured. If you let yourself be vulnerable enough to do that, then you're going to invite in this whole new opportunity and journey. It's almost like meditation. When I was training, I couldn't meditate. It was I could never shut my brain down. And the problem was I had the wrong teacher. Because I felt judged in the space. And then I finally found a teacher, and I get the benefit of meditation, tantric breathing, mindfulness now more than anybody else, because I'm in a high stress environment. So I invite you to just let yourself be vulnerable enough to go find a friend in this journey, which is what a clinician can be for you. And yes, it's the proverbial friend. It's not the clinicians don't call Lynda up and tell her, that psychologist said that we're friends. We get it. But you have a friend and you're a clinician, and we walk side by side in your journey. We're in the mud. We're in the pits. Yes. And when you come out, we all come out clean, right?
Good.
I'm clean.
That's so good. Dr. James, I'm going to have you back again because there is still so much we can unpack. There are so many things I was like, I want to dig in a little deeper. I so appreciate you. For those of you that are out there, Dr. James does public speaking. She does keynotes. She does trainings. You can reach out to her. Can you give us your website, Dr. James?
Absolutely. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Respire BH Health. And then our website is respirebh.com. We're located in Maryland, but we do work all over the country.
Yes. And as you begin to see her shorts, you're going to see her information there also, so that you can connect with her. Go on out there and connect with her on social media and see some of the awesome things that she is doing. Dr. James, I'm so glad you silenced Syretta tonight and you came on in the elephant room and we got to hang out. I appreciate you for all the work that you're doing and for everything that you have shared with us in the elephant room. Thank you all. Until next time, make sure that you be well and take very good care of yourself.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Elephant Room. Make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for more powerful insights, down-to-earth conversations, and the courage to face whatever comes your way. This is where vulnerability meets strength and transformation gets real.